Welcome back to the Brahmin Word, and we are continuing on with the life of Joseph, but really exciting. We are getting to the point where he and his brothers unite, even though his brothers don't know who Joseph actually is. So go with me to Genesis chapter 42, and we're going to start seeing the dreams that Joseph had in the presence of his brothers at the beginning of his passages in the book of Genesis. We're going to see those dreams come to reality or start to come to reality right here in this chapter. So, chapter 42, verse 1 in Genesis. When Jacob learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" And he said, "Behold, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers, for he feared that harm might happen to him. Thus the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. So, as we talked about last week, this famine is not just for Egypt. It is very much and not just a regional, but a global thing. A global being the regions that were occupied at the time of the civilization. So, but yeah, it's very much a global famine, and so it shouldn't come as a surprise that the Israelites need help, and Jacob needs help, and so he tells his brothers, "Hey, I think the question here in verse 1, why do you look at one another?" It's like, why are you doing just standing around? Like, we need to do something. And so he tells them about Egypt, and he says they should go. And the older brothers of Joseph go, and there's 10 of them. However, there is an 11th brother, uh, Joseph being the 12th. There is an 11th brother that is supposed to go, you would think, but is kept back, and that is Benjamin. He is the youngest son of Jacob, but more importantly, he is the younger son of Rachel. Joseph being the oldest son of Rachel, Benjamin being the youngest. And so, yes, Jacob definitely saw the connection between Rachel and Joseph, but there's still very much a connection when it comes to Benjamin and Rachel. And if you recall as well, Rachel has died, and so Benjamin is kind of like the last connection that Jacob has to Rachel, because again, he believes that Joseph has been slaughtered, that he has been ripped apart by wild animals, because he was given the coat of many colors that had blood on it. Now, of course, they didn't do any DNA tests back in the day to show where the blood came from, but because of that, Jacob just assumes it's Joseph's, and so therefore Joseph is now gone, and that connection to his late and dear wife Rachel is now gone, and so because of that, Benjamin is really the last connection with Rachel in Jacob's mind, and so he keeps him behind. The end of verse 4, for he feared the harm might happen to him, but I think it's because of the connection that there is between Rachel and Benjamin. So they go to Egypt, and now we see how Joseph responds. Verse 6. Now Joseph was governor of the land, that second in charge. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. So, a couple things here. It establishes the authority that Pharaoh gave Joseph at the end of chapter 41, but it also shows the structure that Joseph put into place in the end of chapter 41. But then finally, at the end of verse 6, we have the fulfillment of the very first dream where the brothers were going to bow down to Joseph. Now, obviously, in their minds, they're thinking, well, he's the youngest. Why in the world would we bow down to him? Um, Makes no sense. Or he's one of the youngest. He's one of the youngest. So why would we bow down to him? And he's also just kind of spoiled by our father. So why would we bow down? Why would we want to? And here they are bowing down to him. Now, granted, you could say, okay, but isn't there isn't it a little bit different because they don't know it's actually Joseph? And that's a valid point. However, the Lord put Joseph in this situation exactly knowing what was going to happen and fulfilling that dream. Because again, Joseph, yes, he had the dream and he interpreted the dream, but he doesn't bring about the dream. Only the Lord brings the fulfillment of the dream. And so Joseph, yes, he's not known to his brothers at this time when they're bowing to him, uh, but it's still very much a fulfillment of that first dream. Now, the second one was the brothers bowing down to him, but also his mother and his father, and we'll get to that later on. But it's interesting to see that. It's interesting to see that fulfillment finally come about. Verse 7. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he treated them like strangers and spoke roughly to them. Where do you come from? He said. They said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. So, first off, is it wrong for Joseph to treat them like strangers? Is it vindictive? Um, it could be, but I think he is doing a couple things here. He's trying to see what their intentions are, and then he's also trying to make sure that he also keeps his how do I say this? It's not he's keeping his authority with Pharaoh in a greedy manner, but he's making sure that this 7 years of famine does not have any sort of distractions or obstacles in the way. And I think if he just went ahead and just revealed himself right away, his brothers, and especially his father, would want him to spend more time with them or to leave Egypt entirely. And then the whole entire operation of the 7 years of abundance and then the 7 years of famine could come into jeopardy. And so I think there's a little bit of difference there. And then two or three, I guess. The third option, it could be an air of courtesy to the Egyptians that he is making sure that they know that he's not just letting whoever he wants in. He's making sure that the land stays safe, even though it's his own brothers, right? But they did not recognize him, which makes sense because he obviously probably does not look like a Hebrew completely anymore. He most likely is going to be dressed in Egyptian attire. He's most likely going to have, whether it's earrings um, or a lot of or a lot of scholars believe that the pharaohs would use some sort of makeup on their skin. That's totally possible. And so basically, it makes sense why they don't recognize him, but also because it has been so long since the time that he was put into slavery that not, they wouldn't forget his face, but you could see them possibly depress those memories so they don't have to relive them in their mind every single time they see their father and bring that back up. Again, not excusing their actions, right? But it could be that that is another reason why they did not recognize him, because they had repressed the memory of the thing that they had done. Now, is that the case? We'll see as the brothers are being interviewed by Pharaoh, and then especially when Benjamin is brought to Egypt and to Pharaoh himself. So, verse 8, or sorry, verse 9. And Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of them. And he said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." So he recalls to himself that the first dream has been fulfilled. And really, the most of the second dream has been fulfilled outside of the sun and the moon, or Jacob and Rachel. And so he calls them spies. Basically, he's putting them on the spot. I believe he is testing them to see what kind of character they have now. Verse 10. They said to him, "No, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." I think that's interesting that they describe themselves as "we are all sons of one man." And then they, oh, can you imagine? Can you imagine the emotions going on in Joseph? Not only do you see your brothers, the ones that sold you into slavery, you recognize them very much so, because they probably don't look any different, but they have no clue who you are, don't recognize you. And then they say the words in verse 11, "We are honest men." Oh my gosh, can you imagine the just the turmoil in Joseph's heart and in his mind? Honest men? You sold your own brother into slavery. Can you imagine what he must have been thinking? Um, I can't, like that must have been insane to hear, and yet he does not do anything. Now he follows that up with a statement, but he doesn't like call the guard and have all of them butchered, or have all of them um, or have all of them executed or whatever. He doesn't do that, but he continues to test them and see, okay, are they honest men now? Are they remorseful for the crimes and the bad behavior that they showed towards me? Verse 12. He said to them, "No, it is the nakedness of the land that you have come to see." In the nakedness of the land part, I think that could be a reference to the openness of Egypt, with all these different nations coming to them. My guess is they're still probably pretty fortified still. I'm sure there's plenty of guards around, but it is a lot more open because they are being very generous, and they're also, obviously the Lord has gone before Joseph and made sure to save all of these people from the famine. Verse 13. And they said, "We, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of one man, in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more." So you hear the family tree, basically, the family tree story from the brothers, that they are of 12. And Joseph in his mind is thinking, yeah, but then they explain it. Look, um, yeah, there's only 10 here, but the youngest is with our father, and then one is no more. They don't go the second youngest, they don't name Joseph by name. They just say, "and one is no more." I think you could still see or sense the whether it's hostility, but I think at this point it's probably more guilt and just maybe even misery at the thought of what they have done. Verse 14. But Joseph said to them, "It is as I said to you, you are spies. By this you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not go from this place, unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you, and let him bring your brother, while you remain confined, that your words may be tested whether there is truth in you. Or else, by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies." And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. So you could, and we'll get to the the plan that Joseph just brought up, bringing Benjamin to Egypt. We'll get to that on Thursday, or we'll start to get to that on Thursday. But I think the reason why he brings this up is not to spite his brothers, but to test them, test their character. And the test here is, are they willing to put the youngest brother, uh, separate him from their father, just like Joseph was separated from their father. Again, I don't think that this is out of spite, because it would have said, and Joseph says angrily or violently, or shouting, he says. It just says, but Joseph said to them. So I think for me, it is this test of character of the brothers, the 10, not Benjamin, but the 10 brothers, to see, have they changed, and more importantly, are they remorseful or feel guilty in any way, shape, or form from what Joseph went through. Um, and so far, not really. They mention that there was this one brother who's no more, but that's it. But before that, they call themselves honest men. Even though they know exactly what happened to Joseph, they just say he is no more. Now, granted, he is no more could mean the fact that he is no longer part of the family, but we know where he went towards. But I think it's mainly, you almost wonder, do the brothers think that Joseph died in slavery? It's a good question to ask. And I'm not entirely sure. I think deep down, probably. But do we know that for a fact? It's hard to tell. But most likely, they have either thought that he is completely off the grid, they'll never see him again, or he has died in slavery. Most likely that is the idea. But Joseph does put them in custody. He doesn't execute them, he doesn't butcher them, but he does put them in custody, and that's a consequence for the hatred of the brothers. But he does this for 3 days. And why does he only do it for 3 days? Well, again, the number three is very important in scripture. It gives you kind of this time period to think through the offer that has been placed. Will you bring your youngest brother to me, to Joseph? And now they have to decide, will they do that, even though that goes against what their father said? Now they have to figure that out. And so with that, we will see how they respond to that offer on Thursday. But thanks for spending time with me today as we see the fulfillment of the dreams involving Joseph and his brothers today. Thanks.